The latest Transparency International corruption ranking is out, and Nigeria has dropped 3 places, scoring lower than it recorded in the previous year. The country is now in 149th place out of 179 countries, with a corruption perception index score of 25 out of 100. The lower ranking is an indication that corruption is perceived to have worsened in Nigeria within the last year.
During the briefing, panelists decried the lack of transparency in the Nigerian government, using the mishandling of COVID-19 palliatives as the most recent example.
The COVID-19 pandemic out of Nigeria's responsibility. There has been a lack of transparency in the emergency response of the government. Coupled with the gap in coordination, the process has been fraught by incessant flouting of procurement guidelines, ordering of relief materials and diversion of these materials, which are then used as personal souvenirs presented to the political party loyalists and close associates.
In cases where government officials have been charged with corruption, many citizens remain skeptical about justice truly being served due to the lack of transparency by the government.
The infighting and politicizing of the anti-corruption agenda will be evidenced by the way of suspending the acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Mr. Ibrahim Mago. The accusation that he failed to give a proper account of assets recovered by his agency is questionable, provided no clear legal and policy asset recovery framework exists.
The Nigerian police force was also highlighted as a result of the rampant bribery and corruption that has become a normal occurrence by many Nigerian policemen.
The year 2020 witnessed the EndSARS protest, which saw young people across the nation demanding an end to police brutality and corruption. A factor that led to this protest was widespread bribery and extortion by law enforcement officials, especially the police. The first and second national corruption survey conducted by United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, UNODC, in partnership with the government's National Bureau of Statistics, NBC, and released in 2017 and 2019, both show that Nigerian police is the institution with the highest prevalence of bribery among the institutions measured.
These are just a few of the examples of corruption in Nigeria's government that were mentioned, with a few recommendations given on how to tackle some of these issues that are stagnating Nigeria's progress.
And of course, the first one for us would be that government needs to, as a matter of urgency, institute a framework that deals with transparency in the utilization of COVID-19 relief fund by state and non-state actors. This must be ensured as a measure and mechanism to rebuild confidence between citizens and the state, because part of what resulted in the anger of the youth and of course ended up as the revolution that we saw in the outcome year is a function of the angst against the state. So citizens have lost confidence. Public servants should be appointed, appraised, and promoted on merits to produce or to reduce the level of nepotism and favoritism. Low-sidedness in appointment increases perception of corruption of the due process. The National Assembly should speed up the deliberation and passage of relevant anti-corruption-related laws or amendments to strengthen anti-corruption efforts in the interest of Nigerians. The presidency should assent to these laws once they are passed, while taking into consideration the best interest of citizens.
The Nigerian government has significant strides to make in order to renew the trust of the Nigerian people as well as the global community. Creating laws that address corruption specifically is a step in the right direction. However, implementation of these laws was said to be just as important in the fight against corruption. Wamimo Laleye, ARISE News.
And earlier, the head of Transparency International Nigeria, Awal Musa Rafsanjani, was on the ARISE interview with our colleague Charles Anyegolu.
Well, for Nigeria and Nigerians, they don't need actually Transparency International to know that there's a pervasive of corruption in Nigeria, as even the government itself, through the National Bureau of Statistics, have conducted survey on corruption, and it shows that corruption is still fundamental in Nigeria. ICPC had also carried out survey, and it shows that there is a huge corruption in Nigeria. So even government institution itself, it has actually conducted, survey of corruption, how Nigeria they perceive government, institutions. The latest one that was done by UNODC in collaboration with the, NBC.
And ARISE News Analyst Dr. Sam Amadi joins us again to have a conversation about this new Transparency International reporting. Sam, does this come to you as a surprise, really? And we also need to look at the fact that corruption is one of the key pillars of this administration, and since 2015, it seems like we've not gotten it right.
Well, just like Awa said, I mean, it's not a surprise at all. This is about perception. Even if we're not doing a real for elections and their performance, the perception is very clear that it has worsened, even in the context of post-SARS. In spite of the SARS protests, we are still seeing reports today of police brutality, extortion. So basically, it signals, it tells a story that at the level of high command, either of the IG, nobody has signaled a new procedure. So the problem of the war against corruption is that it's not really like creating new incentive structures, new collective actions, some kind of reciprocity and expectation. So basically, public behavior has not changed. Standard operating systems of institutions have not changed, and then perception has worsened because experience of corruption at various points of engagement between citizens and the state increases. So whether it's policing, whether it's maybe the district sector, whether you're talking in terms of custom or border, all parts of the code. So primarily, this is not just about perception, mirrors more or less reality. And so in the context of the war against corruption, we can argue clearly that Nigerians have an experience of even intensification. Like Shoyinka said a few days ago, that the government has probably abandoned everything about the war against corruption. The institutional instability and lack of definiteness about EFCC in terms of governance also mirrors into a weakened war against corruption and a general sense in which impunity still reigns high.
So that brings us to the issue of President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015 went around the country and said, if I get a chance to run Nigeria, corruption will not be allowed to kill us. But then the perception is that it is even worse now than the government that was before him. So how do we handle a situation like this? The question will be amongst all Nigerians, especially the young Nigerians online, is there any hope for Nigeria?
Yeah, there's hope first. But again, President Buhari failed in the 80s when it came to fight corruption. Okay, it didn't succeed. Now, what has happened is that the government has been overwhelmed. Clearly, the president has been overwhelmed by the crisis because the crisis requires ramification. You have to understand, how does corruption work? Then the political will, they said the driver of corruption is politics. And by politics, I mean political governance, transactions. So if the president has not reformed politics, day one, when he took over government, starting from the election of the House of National Assembly officials, to appointment of officials, those appointed, the optics of those appointed, to processes that the government, rules they follow. Nothing was really done in a sensible, coordinated, and coherent manner to create a new beginning. So the matter that the president will lose this war is already given. By the first 6 months in office, it was clear to anybody who was objective and who was knowledgeable that the war against corruption had been lost.
No, so some would actually argue with you, because if you remember vividly when the president first came into power, a lot of people without even being asked to do so, even returned properties that they had probably gotten from a different means. But Wale Soyinka yesterday or today, I believe, he said that this administration has actually run out of steam, and that's the reason why the system is being manipulated. But some would also say that the fact that we're not seeing a lot of prosecution from these agencies, and even the heads of some of these anti-corruption agencies have their own corruption issues. How much of an impact would you say that has actually had on the fight against corruption in Nigeria?
Absolutely. That functionality starts from the beginning. You see, it's not enough that people are turning, people are frightened at the beginning. Then the body language, they read the political barometer, and they see that the so-called war against corruption was symbolic and mere lip service. They now went back to their business. So the point remains that if you're talking about that functionality and lack of prosecution, everything points to the fact that the government has not been consistent, coherent, and effective in that fight.
Dr. Sam Amadi, ARISE News Analyst, thank you for joining us tonight.